I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, we have the beautiful Levine. Ali has worked for some of the biggest names in the fashion industry. Born and raised in New York, she relocated to Los Angeles, California, and became a household name as a celebrity stylist. Ali recently appeared with her husband on Bravo's hit show Stripped. With the birth of her daughter, Amelia Ray, Ali has transitioned to mompreneur and mommy influencer across the board. Belonging to sought-after mommy groups, her fashion sense plus real-life day-to-day inspires so many people. So Ali and I met about a year ago. We were both at an event in Los Angeles, and I was there with my card products. And Ali, you came by, and it's just so interesting to me always at these events because some people just, want to get some stuff and move along, and then other people really connect. And we connected, and then we connected since on Instagram, and I just love everything that you share. And I just was so curious for us to have this conversation because, as a celebrity stylist and an influencer, I can only imagine that there are so many things pulling you out of center, and you've really incorporated this beautiful intention practice. So I want to explore that with you. So welcome.
Thanks, Adrienne. I'm so excited to be on your show. And yeah, we met at I think it was Sarah Simonandi's my girlfriend and who owns Bloom, the beauty company. I'm having total pregnancy brain right now, but she has a Bloom Media, and she is Beauty Mommy, and she does all these fun, amazing events, bringing beauty and wellness and all these different things together. And I believe she had you there to really bring in that space, like you said, of like the cards and the intentions and all of that. And this is something that I've been, really getting more and more into and exploring in the last year and a half or so, I would say, like heavily when it comes to like actually starting to make it a practice versus something I was dabbling in for years. And your cards just spoke to me. I remember going over with my girlfriends and, we were, like, hey, let's go see what these cool cards are. And I remember us like flipping them over and they said, may you know joy. And I just remember even just that alone, like really got my attention because it was like, oh, wow, like it almost sets an intention before you even really like actually see all the different intentions that are part of your deck. And it really drew me to you. And I remember us just like, getting to pull, some cards, and you let us take a couple cards home with us. And I remember sitting with them when I got home and just being like, wow, there's just something about these. And I was really drawn to them. And I've been given card decks before, and I've had, other kinds of affirmations handed to me, but for whatever reason, yours really did stick with me. And I continued to get to use them. And then you had reached out and asked to send me like a full deck. And then I was able to really hone in and really get to play with the deck and started pulling them each morning. And I don't know, there was something about them that made me want to see and kind of like, I guess, continue to be intentional to see what I would get each morning. So I really tried to not only make a practice and be intentional for myself, but then I started sharing it on social to also make it for others, but I think also to hold myself a little bit more accountable that if I was sharing it there, then I was kind of telling me like I was had to do the card pull because I was sharing it there and it wasn't just, me doing it. And at first it was kind of like, I'll just do it just to kind of see what I get. But then the more I did it, the more I got intrigued, the more I really felt like I felt the cards and what they were saying, and different days they'd speak to me on heavier days and that kind of thing. And yeah, I really honestly fell in love with it. And then, like you said, we connected further on social because I was sharing them so much. And we kept chatting. And then I got your amazing book, The Intentional Days. And then I love that I read that now, front to back quite a few times. It's a very easy read and it's a great book. And now I kind of just flip through to a chapter every now and again, every few days, and just see what speaks to me. And it's really interesting because I feel like every time I pull something, it really does speak to the moment. Like the other day, I pulled the chapter on fear. And I find that really interesting with everything going on right now and being pregnant, during a pandemic and all these other fears that I have, going on. That was the chapter I pulled. And after I read it and read it out loud and then said it to myself in my head, I was like, wow, that really resonates. So, yeah, I just think, obviously everyone's different things speak to them, but I love the way you have crafted all of this and just the simple words that go around it to really, if you want to be intentional, you really can be.
Yeah, and like I'm just beaming as you're saying all of this, just because like my favorite thing is to hear like when the cards are being used. Like that, yeah, we're picking them every day. Some days, might be tougher than others, but it's like this showing up for ourselves because it is a practice. And even for me, sometimes I'll pick a card and I'm like, oh, like I don't know if I can do this today. So it's imperfect and messy, but we keep showing up. So I want to ask you, like, so for people listening, like, being a celebrity stylist and an influencer, can you tell us what that's like, and what that involves for you? And I could be totally wrong, and I want you to call me on it if I am, but I wonder, like, if there are aspects of that, yeah, like, can just pull us more out of being intentional. And I just love that you're weaving it in and using your influence to, yeah, improve people's lifestyles in every facet.
Well, thank you. First off, I really appreciate those kind words. And no, you wouldn't be incorrect to say that it does definitely have an effect, and it definitely does play in different ways. I mean, before I became a mom, I was very much focused into the materials and in Hollywood. And, it's part of my job, it's part of my job to look fabulous. It's part of my job to make sure everyone else looked fabulous, to really play the part. And I did, and I played it well. And
And it must be fun.
it's totally fun. I mean, so much
Right.
around, so many amazing opportunities that you would never get to be a part of, I mean, that I know of, besides, what you were doing. And, I loved it. I really did. It was an incredible chapter in my life. And it's still there. It's just kind of, transitioned in different ways. But during that time, I think it is hard to be intentional. And it is hard to look at maybe something like those cards or just want to be more present to something when it's constantly go, go, go. I felt like I was on autopilot 24/7, but I allowed that autopilot and I embraced it and I loved it. And I loved the fact that I was always go, go, go. I love the fact that I never had a minute to take a second. And if I did, it was just to make sure something, was posted or shared about my celebrity, or I had to get this done for celebrity trends, or whatever it may be. And I never had a minute to breathe.
Could you tell us like what a day in the life might have been like
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, every day was different.
in a short amount of time? Because I'm sure they were jam packed.
Right. Yeah. How time do we have? Um, So, I mean, every day was jam packed and every day was different, So it was like one day could be dressing my actual client and getting them ready for a red carpet and running all over town and getting, all the gowns and all the jewelry and making sure everything is ready for the fitting and meeting them at their home and actually getting them dressed for the event. Other days could be getting hired for an event and would mean sourcing and visualizing and mood boards and, creating all these different things aesthetically to show the client or show the manager or the agency. Other days could be on set, just styling a commercial that, was a massive, major commercial for national television, and getting that ready and making sure that every single character had many options for the agency that was going to tell you a million times to change what they were wearing, and shopping and returning, and I mean just so many different entities, but like 15 to 18-hour days easily, and sometimes more. um and I loved it. I loved it. Was so busy. I loved that there was never really a minute to rest. I always joked that I never really ate because I didn't remember to.
Oh my
It kind
God.
of sounds terrible, but it was so true. I was on such a high, and I was in such adrenaline mode that I didn't remember. It was like all of a sudden my assistant would be like, "Oh, you're cranky," or "Oh, you haven't eaten like 10 hours, maybe you should eat." And I'd be like, "Oh, yeah, sure. That sounds like a good idea." It was like that. I didn't have the time to waste in my mind to worry about eating. I had to focus on my clients, make sure everyone was happy, and make sure I was continuing to move forward. So, being that busy with everything, it's like, and everything would change by the minute. It was like this person would say, "That dress is great." And then 2 seconds later, it was like, "No, it's not. She's going to this award show. Someone else supposedly is wearing that color. We need to change everything." So it's like everything could just change in a minute. And some people get really overwhelmed by that, and some people get really, flustered. I thrived in it and I loved it. So for me, it was like, bring it on. The more challenge, the more craziness, the more you were constantly, challenging me design wise, fashion wise, and all these things. I was all for it.
That's awesome. And so, like, where, from this, like, yeah, like so busy. Like, I just hear like adrenaline, and just going, yeah, just like thriving on the high. Like, where did things shift for you? When did you start to be like, oh, I am gonna pause, or maybe you needed to pause, and how did that shift occur?
So it's funny because, like, I always laugh about this when people kind of ask me this question, because I still am trying to kind of navigate fully where this all shifted for me. And I think there's a few different pieces to it. But, I as a lot of people know, I was on that show on Bravo, called Stripped with my husband. And, that show, as much as it was a show, it was all about having everything taken away from you for 21 days, no materials. What does that look like for you? They did so much studying on documentary styles that, like, it takes 21 days for most people to break a habit or change a habit or create a new habit. And so the premise was around the 21 days of my husband and I, being in our own bubble essentially, and not having all these things. And, when it was first presented to me to do it and everything, like, I was like, no. And I was like, I need my fashion stuff. I need my jewelry. I need this, I need that. And they were like, this is exactly why we want you, because you think you need all these things 24/7. You think you need, to have these shoes, this jewelry, and then this and then that, and I was like, I do, and that was really honestly my mindset. I was like, I do, and my husband was like, I think this would be good for you. Like, we don't really, on a personal note, we weren't really connecting because I wasn't making the time, and I wasn't, communicating. I wasn't really being a very, present wife. And my husband's so supportive of me and my career that he kind of just, he kind of dealt with it, because he's like, well, you're doing really well in what you're doing, and we came out here for your career, and I want to be supportive. And, and he's so good like that. But at the same time, like, in reality, it was like, personally, there really wasn't the connection that, that there should have been as being partners and, husband and wife. And I wasn't present. I wasn't present to anyone. It wasn't just him. I wasn't present to my friends. I wasn't present to myself. I wasn't present to my family. I was just very much on autopilot, like I said. So he was like, I think you should do this. I think this would be a really interesting experience for us, blah, blah, blah. So we end up, sign the dotted line, sign up for the show, do this whole thing. And, I really believe the beginning of my shifts and everything started from this. And it's funny because, again, it's a show and people are like, really? It's a television show. But I think about, like, even with all the different opportunities I've had in Hollywood to be on different television shows and gone to so many different projects and pilots and this and that. And none of them ever panned out. It was like fashion, it was celebrity, it was styling, it was, all these different things. And they never panned out. And I always would think to myself, all right, whatever, I guess I'm not supposed to do that. But then when this did, and this felt so like, seriously, like this show, this is what we're going to be doing, it was like I had to take a step back and I was like, maybe this was handed to me for a reason. And I think, after I came out of it, especially, I realized it really was. And I believe it was my grandmother, who my daughter is named after, who, passed, 7.5 years ago, was like my very best friend. I believe my angel and a part of my guidance in this world and everything. And I think it was like, you need this wake up call. You need to go through this to essentially allow yourself to shift and to see things in a different way and to kind of come out of this tornado of adrenaline and, constant go, go, go and all of that. And I don't think, to be honest, I would have done that for quite a while after. And, Justin and I have been talking about, having children in the near future and this and that. And I just think it was handed to me at the right time because after going through it and then realizing how much, even though I love material things and I loved, being around all that and I missed it during the show and everything, I realized I really didn't need it. And it wasn't a need. It was more of just like a want and something I enjoyed and something that, I felt fulfilling in different ways. But I also realized that I had such a void and I was using so much of it to mask so much of my own emotion and not deal with certain things in my personal life and not, handle things that I, didn't want to handle of that nature. And stripped kind of forced me to. And it made me really look at things really differently. And I think that going from that, and then shortly after finding we were pregnant, I don't think it was a coincidence. I really believe it was given to me to shift me, to allow me to be present to become pregnant and to be able to be present in my relationship with Justin. And to then really, once motherhood came, to shift. Because my pregnancy, honestly, I mean, I was a little bit more aware, but being real, like I was still running around styling at, 36 weeks, barely could get behind the wheel, but was still running and getting dresses and, doing what I needed to do and shift and this and that. And it was just like, just gonna make this happen, keep going, keep going. But then once I had Amelia, and also when I think back now to like her birth, I kind of wonder if her birth also played a part in the shift because I wanted a natural water birth. I wanted to be at a birth center. I had all these like hopes and dreams for my birth, and it all went, awry. Which I of course had no clue because it was my first birth, and I ended up after being at the birth center for 30 hours going to the hospital, non-emergency, thank God, but because I wasn't progressing past 6 centimeters and it was just getting to be a lot and I was having a hard time. And my midwife was like, you know what, like, let's go, this is why we have a backup doctor. Let's go get an intervention. Da, 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 da. So we went to the hospital, and I got different drugs to try to help me move along. And after all that, and struggling through that and having a very hard time at the hospital, long story short, and having a hard time with all that, I ended up in a non-emergency, unexpected C-section after 42 hours. And I remember just being like crushed and, really like, oh my gosh, this is not what I wanted. It's not what I planned. This is not what I, envisioned, all these things. And when I came out of it and I got home and I was, really upset and really traumatized by my birth and home and everything, and then ended up going through postpartum depression, all these things. When I came out of all that, I realized that maybe this was also part of the shift. Like maybe instead of just looking at this like as a bad, experience in the sense of like the actual birth and all that and like my hopes and dreams getting cast to the side. Obviously, I was grateful that I was healthy and I was fine. Amelia was healthy and I was fine. But for me, it was more of this like deeper layer. And I think that when I really started doing the work and I was, seeing a postpartum specialist and going to therapy and all these things, and we would talk about visualization and we talk about different ways to work through things that kept coming up for me was like I couldn't control it. I felt out of control. And being someone that has always been in control and in that autopilot mode and doing things, I kind of wonder if the universe was like, okay, we kind of tried to give you a lesson with the whole thing that you went through at the show. And then you didn't really fully get it. I got it. I got it to a point, But it was like, I felt like it was almost like, it was like this, like, tap on the shoulder again, like, okay, we didn't really get it. So now we're going to really take you there and, really try to, shake this up so you understand it. And then it was like, being forced at home. Like I said to my clients, I'll be back in 3, 4 weeks back on set. I couldn't even get out of bed for like 6 weeks because of my C-section. Like, my first set job was like 2 months later because I didn't have a choice that I could be there. And then even when I was there, I was in so much pain that I ended up, not doing the next job. And so I think for me, it was like this reality check of like, you're not going to, quote unquote, bounce back and run off, to this next client. And like, you need to be present and be a mom and all these things. And I think it was like a real teaching lesson for me and growing and shifting that really put it into perspective for me of like, okay, in some way, shape, or form, life is going to have to slow down. And I know you don't want to hear that. I know you don't want to think that, but it's going to have to. And at first, I really fought it. Like, I really fought the fact that I have to slow down. But now looking back and seeing how much I have shifted and how much motherhood in every sense of the way has shook me to my core, but in the best ways possible, I have shifted so much. And now it's like, it's honestly like I look at myself and I don't even recognize that old Allie anymore. I can talk about it. I can visualize it. I can feel it, but I don't even recognize because it's like I just, I still have that strong work ethic, but that autopilot, that constant tornado, all that, it's like, it's just gone. And I used to be so afraid to lose that and to like not be able to be me and be productive. But really now I look at things and I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel like I actually get more done now, if that's even possible. But I'm not crazy at 24/7 and I'm embracing, life and I'm enjoying life with Amelia and Justin and I'm getting to really like smell the roses as they say and like pay attention and be present and like if something amazing happens in my career, I actually give myself 5 minutes to be excited about it and like tap myself on the back instead of going, okay, what's next? What's next? What's next? And it's just such a different feeling. And yeah, it's a very interesting shift. It's something that I'm still very, very much present to. And I have to check in with myself consistently because there are days where not like the styling days, but just where things will get a little bit crazy. And when I feel myself getting like that, now it actually overwhelms me. Now it doesn't feel good. And now I have to actually like sit there and go, okay, what did I not do today? Okay, I didn't meditate. Okay, I didn't pull a card. Okay, I didn't journal. I have to do these little like check boxes in my toolbox of like what is going to get me back to feeling grounded? What is going to help me be able to now go through the day and be present to it and still get things done?
That's amazing. I just love so many aspects of this just because, well, I was laughing only because I understand it so well. But, when you describe, the universe tapping on your shoulder, because I've had many of those taps. And then it was like, okay, now we're going to hit you with the frying pan because you're
Exactly. The
not
whole
paying attention. And then
right.
I just also see, like, listening to all of this because I didn't know a lot of this. I mean, I could kind of piece things together, but this is just so fascinating is also, how all of these pieces of your life, so all of the struggles and hardships, but also like all of your um, positive experiences and your following, like it all comes together. Like, so now in motherhood and with these experiences, you can use your influence to help so many people, who look up to you and admire you and are like, oh, she's going through this too. Like, that's really powerful.
Thank you. Well, and that's why like, I laugh when people say, I'm a quote unquote influencer. It's like to me, I'm like, okay, well, if I'm someone of influence and I'm someone that shares, and because of the way I share, then that has people connected to me and creates community, then yes, absolutely. And I'm all for it. But the whole, like, I just feel like influencers get a bad rap because so many, it's like, oh, I'm showing you a lipstick. It's like, You know what I mean? Like for me,
Totally.
I'm not gonna lie, like I've made a business out of it. So I do share products, but for me, I share products that truly align with me, that I use in my everyday life, things that I believe in, whether I'm being paid or not, obviously with like everything that we've done. And it's things that like speak to me and that help me, or are a hack for me or for my family or for me as a mom, or whatever it may be, or something with fashion, because I still share my fashion trends and tips and all of that, so it's like things that genuinely and um align with me. That's really where, I feel like the difference is. And it's interesting, like, I mean, I've archived most of it now because my feed has changed so much, but I was laughing at myself a couple years back when I first had Amelia, because I was like, going through my feed and archiving and looking at these photos of me, super photoshopped, super, selfie and glam at the Hollywood red carpets with my clients. And it's like, wow, I'm like, look at the difference in like all these years of like my, of course, hard work and everything I was doing in Hollywood, but like this really like, like glam kind of fake, very Hollywood life. And then now, like, I remember my first post that I posted after having Amelia was about my postpartum depression. It was about how hard everything was for me. And I was just like, it was so raw. It
Yeah.
was so different. The picture was so not glam. And I couldn't get glam because I wasn't in that place. And I didn't have the time to, and I didn't have the mental capacity and all these things. And I just remember when I shared it that I lost so many followers in that day. Like I'll never forget. I was like bawling because I like within that day and that like 2 weeks, I watched my following drop like 10,000 followers. And I was just like, holy crap, there goes like part of my business and my community. And I was so like distraught. And I just remember like after archiving so many photos of like everything from Hollywood, like I had gotten down like another 15,000 followers. I mean, it was crazy to see how many people were choosing to not, follow me.
Hmm.
I mean, I was really overwhelmed by it. And, the most beautiful thing happened after all that kind of passed after a little bit. The mom community started following me. And all of a sudden, pregnant moms and moms, that were already seasoned mamas and just different stages of life of motherhood actually, started following me. And all of a sudden, my following grew by the masses, but in a whole different way. And that again was a shift for me. All of a sudden, when I was starting to share on social, it was no longer this glam and, amazingly perfect space. It was real, raw Allie and real, raw motherhood. And that's kind of where it's gone. And I didn't even mean for that shift to really happen. It just did, and now I feel so like authentically aligned in what I share and what I post. And I don't worry anymore. If I post a photo that's like not the cutest or I have no makeup on or whatever it might be, it's just part of that. But back then, I would have been caught dead not having a full face of makeup to post, of myself or with a client or sharing a fashion trend or whatever it may be. And don't get me wrong, I still love glam and I still love getting to look beautiful and get together, but I don't depend on it the way I used to. And I don't feel like I have to have it the way I used to. And so again, it's just part of those shifts that I went through.
I just love it. Like that's so, fascinating. And I just hear you, loving like all of it. Do you know what I mean? Because we do go through so many different phases and experiences, and they're just different parts of us. And it's like, can we love the whole thing, And then it's just so interesting to me about your followers too, because I think it says more about them than it says about you, like neither good nor bad, it's just like, who's here, And then when you can just be really raw and authentic and aligned and in your heart and based on all the experiences you've had, like, how could you not be? Like, it's like rocky and tough and beautiful all at the same time.
Yes, I agree with you. And I think, that was also another lesson for me with shifting and learning was, with becoming a mom, it was like, and when I was going to therapy and all these things of postpartum depression, that was like one of the things that came up in therapy was like, can you love the new you? Can you love the old you as well? Can you love the pieces of you that are being left behind? But, can you rebuild to, who, you still are and all these things? And like, you don't realize that when you do make these shifts in life and you do go through these new chapters, you do kind of like mourn the loss of yourself. And you do feel like maybe, especially for me in motherhood, you lose yourself and, whatever it may be. Maybe you get married, maybe you have a child, whatever it is that shakes that up for you. But you feel like you lose those parts of yourself or you lose those chapters in your life. And it's like, I think it really does for some of us. Me, I mean, I really felt it. I felt really shook. At first it was like I didn't want to embrace it. I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to feel like it was being taken from me. And I wanted to go back. And I was just like fighting it. And like how you were saying with the universe of like the tap and then the frying pan, it's true. It's like I feel like it gives you a tap, then it gives you like a nice swift kick. And then if you're really not listening, it hits you with this like medical 2x4, like, are you paying attention now? So it's just interesting how, as we shift as human beings and different things and we evolve and we allow ourselves to evolve, that we actually become present to those shifts and see, okay, but it's still me and this is all of me and I can love in those different places, like you were saying.
Yeah, and also like there's just although it's difficult at phases and we can't see the full picture, but there's a certain like freedom here and a really raw beauty because what would have happened if on the flip side, you were just like, well, I can't change because I don't want to lose followers. Like to me, that would feel like really being trapped.
Yeah, totally. Well, and I had so much of those moments, like of those trapped feelings and trying to get back and do this and that. And, I think that again, when I finally started, you know, coming into that more and allowing it and processing it and letting the shift happen and not fight the universe, but go with the universe, I think I finally started to really understand what that meant. I used to think to myself I was always allowing the universe and I was just following along, but I realized I was kidding myself and I was just saying I was doing it. But like how you're saying of being intentional and actually being present to it and actually doing the work, I think that's when you really see the shift. I think that's when you really see the difference. And it's interesting because a lot of people have said to me, like, oh, it's so woo woo because like I manifest and do this and that, nothing happens. And I'm like, listen, I've been there too. But when you actually get, like you said, intentional and you actually become present to it and work on it and take steps to continuously be intentional and allow the shifts and continue to evolve with it, that's when you see things happen. That's when, in my opinion, that's when I've experienced those changes in my life.
I totally agree. And like two things I've found on that just to like simplify is yeah, like when we're intentional, number one, the universe is going to counter you and be like, okay, you want to be this? I'm going to give you lots of opportunities to practice. It doesn't just always manifest with a bow on top of it. And then the second part is like sometimes, what comes is what we couldn't have even expected. I think, oh, I want to create this and this is what it looks like. But when it actually comes, sometimes it can just be bigger and better, but look so different. Like I never could have even, like my imagination is just too limited.
Yeah, so true. And I think the more you allow, whatever you want to believe, universe, your guides, God, whatever you feel, brings you to that. I think the more you allow also that to play into that and not have you again trying to control, which is something I've had to learn over and over again, is to release control, the more, like you just said, things can happen that you don't even expect to happen. Like whenever people call me a mommy influencer, I'm like, I have to have like a laugh at that all the time because I'm like, I mean, I guess I am, but like I never expected to be here and I never expected to build a brand around sharing my life as a mom and, working with all these brands and products. And I'm so grateful and I love it. But I never like thought of that as a job for myself. And it's
Yeah.
so wild to me that it just was put kind of in front of me and it continues to create and continues to evolve and, level up, if you will, and keep going. And like, it's just so interesting. So you're right. When you kind of like let go and like let go of God, let go of the wheel and just allow things to happen, more even happens than you could even imagine or have dreamed of.
It's amazing. So what does your, yeah, like daily practice look like right now? What do you, we know you, when you use the cards, what other things help you get grounded?
Well, obviously being so pregnant right now and being ready to pop any day now, it's a little bit more, I would say, structured and intense because I have to really be intentional about making that space for myself and for baby girl and all of that. So it's like a lot of listening to birth affirmations in the morning. It's a lot of also then listening to like regular meditation, sometimes on top of that. I do some journaling about my feelings and like what I'm thinking. Like you said, card pull from your deck. I also card pull from this company called the Renegade Mama that has pregnancy cards and their like pregnancy affirmations and little reminders and intentions. And, I really sit with that and, just deep breathing. Um, and, sometimes a bath in the morning if I feel like a bath, just washing my face and really protecting my morning routine in the first like 10-15 minutes, really focusing on like what I need to do to just feel clear before I really look at my phone, before I get on Instagram. And I try to make that practice even without pregnancy, but I've been very intentional, especially now being at the end, to really hold that space for myself and like protect that space.
Don't you find it really shifts things? Like that whole like not looking at the phone first thing, like it's just like the arm just reaches out like a frog's tongue going for a fly or something. And like just to for me, it was like stopping it. And then when I took the time, I was like, wow, this just shifts everything.
No, it totally does, and I love that you said that because I've noticed that too, like, on the days where I forget or I'm just busy and I don't remember to be so intentional, I will just grab my phone, and then I'll later in the day, I'll, like, have a headache or I'll realize, like, something's off, and I'm like, "Why am I off today?" And then I'll think back to my morning, and I'm like, "Oh, because I started my morning on the phone, scrolling through Instagram, on the news, doing this, doing that," and you don't realize that, like, when you don't protect those first few minutes, whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it is for you that you need to do, like, whether it be exercise or, just stuff that's like self care, or like we said, like, doing different meditations that help set you up for the day, whatever it is that like helps you. If you don't do that and protect that space, the rest of your day can go to chaos because you didn't set yourself up. And I think the more I see that with myself, and the more I see how much better things go, the more it reminds me to be so intentional and to force myself. And even if it doesn't feel like I have the time, I force myself and I'm like, yes, you have 5 minutes to listen to this. Yes, you have 3 minutes to this. Like, and and you don't allow that noise of everything else going on to, take that away. And of course, it's different every day. Like, there's some days where like Amelia, really like wants to be all over me and needs me. And she's jumped on top of me while I'm in the middle of meditation. Like, okay, so be it. It is what it is. But at least I'm still being intentional about trying to keep to that and then go back to it later on, when the time allows it. And I think that's the difference is like realizing for me, especially being busy and being a mom, I'm about to be a mom of two and all these things, is that it's not always going to be maybe the same time every day. It's not always gonna be the same thing, but it's going to still happen if I make it happen and I'm intentional about it.
I love what you just said because, well, there's a few things, like especially when we're so busy, so pulled in other directions, especially as a new mom, that this stuff doesn't have to take a ton of time. Like some people think, I need an hour or all of this stuff. It doesn't have to be a long time. And also, just like coming back to it, right? I've heard a lot of people say, especially with this, pandemic, their schedules are thrown off, they're sleeping in, they're testing out different things, and they're like, oh, I got so off my schedule. And I was like, that's kind of the beauty of this whole thing. It's like the awareness of what you're saying, like, oh, wow, I do actually just feel better when I'm doing this. So if I only have a couple minutes, this is what I'm going to do. So we just keep realigning.
Exactly. And then I think, you hit the nail on the head with saying like sometimes like you think you need an hour, you need this, you need that. And like that would be wonderful. It'd be great to take the, first few hours, but that's not always, realistic for a lot of us. And I think that's where I had to get to also was like finding those little bite-sized moments. Like sometimes I love to meditate for 25 minutes, but if life is not allowing that, then I shift and I find a 5-minute quick meditation so I can still set myself up. I can still feel good about my day, but it's not overwhelming me to sit there and meditate because it doesn't help you if you sit there the whole time and go, okay, 4 more minutes, okay, I have to, because that's what I used to do. It was like, okay, I have to go back to this. So like, okay, 3 more minutes. Okay, let me just listen. It's like, no, you have to actually be present and be intentional in what you're doing to make yourself feel good and then go back to whatever you need to do or start whatever you need to do. And I think that that's, releasing those expectations on yourself and just finding those little moments that allow you to self care and to, set your morning up and all these different routines that you need to do to be ready for the day. I think that's the difference versus just feeling like I must do an hour of meditation. I must make sure I write this and I must, because I think when you put those like musts and, shoulds and, all that, that's when you kind of get into this place of like, then you can shame yourself, then you can feel negative if you don't do something, and you want that to be a positive space. So you have to really just kind of allow things to happen. Like for me, it's like allowing things to happen. And the days that I get to do all those things, it's great. But there's some days where that just isn't reality. And I do what I can. And then I go back to it later in the day. Or when Amelia's napping, I check in and do something for 10 minutes. And, I just find space for those things. And I don't make it like I must have done this. Like now I failed because I didn't set myself up today. It's like, no, these are the things I know that help me. These are my tools. So I need to know to go back to them. But I also can't put the pressure on myself that if I don't get it done that day for myself, that, all is going to go awry. I need to find this, I hate the word balance, but I need to find this like, synergy and this alignment to feel good and however things go, which way.
I so agree with you. Yeah, it can't be like a to-do list item. And yeah, it's like being on our own side and being kind to ourselves. And also, like, yeah, if I've got 1 minute, what can I create for myself? Right. Like that energy of creating is to me much more open than like, gotta do it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like you just said, like the more it's not a to do list and the more you're just enjoying and you just allow that creation to take place and see where it takes you, the more it's more of like a magic and it's more of an alignment versus an actual to do. Because we all have a million to do lists. Like I'm looking at mine right now, like, oh my gosh, I have so many things. I told myself I was going to get done by the end of this week, but now I'm going to have to give myself grace and say, okay, you know what? It may not happen before, it may not all happen before she's here, and that's okay. But I think that, you know, when you create those to-do lists of something that you actually enjoy and you put it on a to-do list, like must meditate, must journal, it takes away the actual intention of why you're doing it.
Completely. Oh, I just want to thank you so much for your time. And yes, baby number two is just like imminent. So I appreciate you sharing this with us. And yeah, your story is just so inspiring. And if people want to follow you and hear what you have to say, which I highly recommend, where is the best place for them to do that?
Thank you for having me on. It was such a great chat. And you can follow me across the board at Ali Levine Design, ALILEVINE and Design. Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Pinterest, TikTok, anywhere really, you choose to look up Ali Levine Design, you'll find my social platforms. I am on Instagram, I would say probably the most, and spend a lot of time in my direct messages connecting with my community and those who choose to reach out to me and follow. So please say hello and connect. I love that I get to continuously do that with my community. And you can go to my website, allylevine.com. I blog on there, fashion, motherhood, lifestyle, different tips and hacks, products I love, kind of a mix of everything. And I still am styling, as I was saying. It's just shifted. I'm doing a lot of remote work and just kind of hand picking clients in the Hollywood world, if you will, at this point. But if you do want to be styled by me, you can reach out to me directly, or you can go to AllieLevineStyling.com, my styling website, and you can book me there. And I have a podcast that Adrian will be on soon as well. And it is called Stripped Down with Allie Levine, STRIPTD, Stripped Down with Allie Levine. Anywhere you listen to a podcast, you can find my podcast. And it's all about real raw motherhood and just real raw stories of, others' lives and, how they find themselves all over again, or maybe, what they're going through. I just wanted it to be like a really real raw space that came from my going through my own journey of postpartum depression and motherhood. So definitely, check that out if you're into podcasts. And yeah, this was so much fun, Adrian. I'm so glad we got to do it.
Thank you so much. That's all like just so good. We'll put it all in the show notes. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.